What is up, Bitcoiners? I just sat down with Ruben Waterman, the CEO and co-founder and one-man band behind Bittr, the original DCA app in Europe. For this podcast, we actually wanted to talk about Ruben's journey of starting Bittr, growing to about 4,000 users in a few months, and then having to shut the business down because of onerous regulations from the Dutch central bank and AMLD5, which is a more blanket compliance regulation from the EU. He actually had to shut down, and he just reopened after 8 or 7 months of trying to figure it out. And then we go, after telling his story, we talk about Europe and Bitcoin in general, and we kind of dive into what Europeans are doing, how Europeans are waking up to the money printing, why Europeans are, for the most part, compliant with everything that the EU and their big governments are telling them, and talk about how Bitcoin kind of gives Ruben hope. This is a great episode. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. But before we do, let's talk about Bitcoin 2021 and MoonPay. Bitcoin 2021 is the biggest event of all of Bitcoin ever. And Ruben's going to be there. Almost everyone I've interviewed on this podcast is going to be there. The entire Bitcoin community is coming together in Miami, June 3rd, 4th, and 5th to celebrate BTC. And, right now prices are down. Recording this after this massive dump here at the end of May. But hopefully by the time you're listening to this, prices are back up and we are celebrating in the maximum heat of the summer in Miami. And if you still haven't gotten a ticket yet and you're listening to this and you think you might be able to, it's probably already sold out, but you can save $400 off of your ticket when you pay with Bitcoin. And you can use our sponsor MoonPay in order to use fiat, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, your credit card, debit card, in order to send us a Bitcoin transaction with no fee. So you can capture that $400 discount. We get paid in sats because that's our preferred payment method. And you can spend your fiat without having to touch your Bitcoin stack. It's a complete win-win. MoonPay is an awesome solution that is built into over 300 wallets and works in over 160 countries with their fiat. And effectively, they make it so that you can buy Bitcoin with fiat, with your credit card, debit card, Apple Pay, all that stuff, without going through a ton of KYC submitting paperwork. And then on the back end, they're going to send you sats to whatever wallet you want. So I love how they're built into non-custodial wallets, enabling users to get access to Bitcoin in an easy and frictionless way, and completely avoid a custodian and exchanges in general. So big fan of MoonPay. Obviously, a huge fan of Bitcoin 2021. I'll be there. I'll be moderating a panel, and I'll be partying with all the plebs on the street. So see ya in Miami, and enjoy this interview with Ruben Waterman. Peace. Bitcoiners, I am sitting across the screen from Ruben Waterman, the creator of Bittr. Ruben has been through quite a roller coaster in terms of being able to run his amazing Bitcoin business, but he is on the Bitcoin Magazine show to talk about getting Bittr back online and helping Europeans stack sats. Ruben, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
So I just want to talk about your journey. I mean, maybe we can start off with a little introduction about yourself and, getting into Bitcoin and starting Bittr. And then maybe you can tell the story of it getting, you having to stop the business, I think in early 2020, and then the journey to getting back online.
Yeah, sure. So I've been interested in Bitcoin for quite some time. Probably people have heard this story before, but back in 2013, when I was still in uni, one of the largest banks in Holland, they asked a bunch of students hey, come check out this new Bitcoin thing, see if we can somehow implement it into our services. So across, I don't know, maybe 2-3 months, we were there every Friday, sitting together. And yeah, we were discovering Bitcoin really, because before I had heard of it in 2011 from one of my roommates when I was studying in Boston, but I didn't pay attention. I was like, oh yeah, sure, this new digital gold. But then in 2013, I really dug into it and took it serious. And yeah, went from there. Then after I finished like normal uni, I did my master's in digital currency, which was like a new thing at the time. It was like at the University of Nicosia in Cyprus. And as I was doing the master's in one of the more like business oriented courses, which like it didn't have that much to do with Bitcoin, but you had to think of a financial service that existed in traditional finance, but did not yet for Bitcoin. So I thought of Acorns in the US, like maybe some of your listeners are familiar. It's like this really easy app to invest in stocks and bonds and out of real estate. I don't even know what exactly.
Pretty much Acorns is you spend money on your credit card or debit card, whatever the change is, it rounds it up and then puts it into a brokerage account.
Yeah. And also on top of that, you can like make it really easy to dollar cost average into ETFs, stocks, whatever you want. So that's at the time, back then, that was kind of missing for Bitcoin. So yeah, I worked this out a bit, like made one of these, business plans in uni. They're not very good, but hey, it's a starting point. And I think then we're like maybe in 2017, was building for about a year together with a company in Romania for like the software development, because at the time I didn't know anything about software development. And then we launched in 2018. We had some good fun and we were getting more and more customers all throughout Europe, basically. And then in 2020, I was like preparing for the whole registration with the Dutch central bank. And it was just a nightmare. You could see that, they just took some regulations that apply to massive banks and they were like, okay, now you Bitcoin companies have to comply with this too. And I started the application, and as I was going through the paperwork, it was just becoming more and more obvious that as just a small entrepreneur doing this kind of service by yourself, that's not the kind of businesses that they want. Like they make you have a compliance officer. Well, if you're just by yourself, it's kind of hard to put compliance onto yourself. So there was all these obstacles, and I was like, at the end of the day, I'm doing this for fun. Like I want to contribute to the Bitcoin ecosystem, and I'm doing this for fun. And this way, it's just not fun anymore. Yeah. So that was the journey up until May 2020, almost a year ago.
So prior to kind of like the new Dutch regulations, which were very onerous, like how much traction had Get Bittr gotten? Like, I mean, you were the first easy, simple DCA service without like necessarily like a full app and all that stuff. We saw Swan Bitcoin and several others kind of copy the model in the US, but just talk about like you as a one-man show building Get Bittr, up until that point. Like, how are things going?
Yeah, we got up until just over 4,000 customers by the end, doing a little bit more than 1 million euros in volume per month. So those were good.
So, I mean, again, as a one-man shop, you're an entrepreneur building on Bitcoin, and then smash, here comes these, AML D5 regulations being interpreted in a very kind of heavy-handed way by the Dutch courts and central bank, right? They're the ones who kind of really laid down the actual laws, right?
Yeah, it's funny what they did, because the initial process was kind of like, copy paste the EU regulations, put it into Dutch, and like, okay, this is what we'll go with. And then as soon as like the Dutch central bank was appointed, there was like all these amendments coming one after the other. And even after it was finalized as law, they still added stuff. So for example, like one of the other Dutch brokers called Bitonic, they were very pissed about this because there's no mentioning of any wallet verification, like the stuff that you need to do with signing a message from an address anywhere in these AML-D5 regulations or in the Dutch law. But it's just something that the Dutch central bank added last minute, like, yeah, you have to do this. Or actually in Holland, it's kind of funny because they made it in such a way that if you make a screenshot of the wallet, that's also proof that you own the wallet, which, I mean, makes no sense.
Pretty weak.
Yeah.
Okay, so Did Bitonic actually have to implement that? Because I remember they
Yeah,
were trying to fight back.
yeah. They took the Dutch central bank to court, and I'm not sure if there is already a verdict or if that still has to come. I'm not sure, but they did take him to court.
Do you see, like, as Bitcoin continues to appreciate, and it's kind of funny to say that on a day like today where it dumped 20% this morning, but we're assuming Bitcoin is going to continue to appreciate. Do you see, like, as Bitcoin continues to appreciate, that companies like Bitonic are going to have more and more ability to stand up to regulators in court and actually fight kind of like these, let's just call it overreaching and stifling regulations?
I'm not sure. Like the process at the Dutch central bank at first seemed kind of open, like they were hosting these information sessions and like, yeah, we want to, talk with the market or see what the industry thinks. But I've been to those discussions and I was like, well, I don't know. It just seems like they don't get it, and it's kind of hard to convince people that don't get it and that they associate or they see Bitcoin just as like some other cryptocurrency, and they just like for them it's all the same, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Doge. It doesn't matter. Like it's all funny internet money, and we're gonna try our best to make it as difficult as possible to do anything in this industry. That kind of seems their mindset.
Yeah, well, it sounds like they want the Dutch people to have fun staying poor.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so let's talk about. So you had to close the doors because of owners' regulations. What happened next?
So for a few months, I was like doing completely different stuff. I was really into building stuff and using my hands. So I built a sauna in my parents' backyard. It was a great way to take my mind off stuff like anything related to Bitcoin, and just I don't know, for 3 4 months I was working on this project. Kind of came to senses. Like I was at the beginning, I was super pissed, like and also actually emotional. Like on the day that I sent that email to all my customers, I actually cried because I was like, this is so unfair. Like somebody else, I was having a good business, and then just somebody else, because they have some funny regulations, it's gone now. Um, but then as it all calmed down over the summer, I was talking to some people, and they were like, well, like in Switzerland, it's still doable to have this kind of thing, like an easy service for people to buy small amounts of Bitcoin without having like an extensive KYC process. Because that was always the my thought. Like if people like if they first come into the Bitcoin world and the first thing they need to do is like upload a passport and utility bill and I don't know what, then it's not very accessible. Like we need to have easy on ramps, at least for the small amounts. Like I understand that if you are going to pour in like tens of thousands of euros, then yeah, maybe as a Bitcoin company, you need to do KYC because you want to know who you're dealing with. But like for these small amounts, it's just nah. So we got together. And eventually it's a Swiss friend of mine, and he was like, well, let me help you. He's a lawyer, and he is now taking care of all the legal stuff of Bittr in Switzerland, and I'm just doing like the business side of it. And in all the time that Bittr was not running, I used that time to teach myself to write some code, so now I can actually maintain the code of Bittr myself instead of being relying on third parties, which I mean, it was actually like a really good way to spend my time.
Awesome. So there's an opportunity to move to Switzerland. You had a friend who kind of gave you support, and let's call it in that 9 months, you learned to code. You took Pierre Richard's advice.
Yes, yes. I'm very happy about it. Like it always felt a bit frustrating, even though the development company I was working with, they're great guys, and I would still recommend them. It sucks to be relying on somebody else's time when you have like an idea, like, oh, I want to make something, like, and now I can just like edit myself. Good feeling.
So like tell me about like the sweet spot of Bittr today. So you relaunched. I guess let's talk about the relaunch first, and then we can kind of talk about use cases, sweet spot, who should be using Bittr, all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. So We launched about 2 weeks ago now. It actually took from November until 2 weeks ago to get this Swiss license, although it's not technically a license, it's only a registration. But without it, you cannot operate in the cryptocurrency industry. So I think it's a license. Took forever to get it, but I mean, I'm happy that we got it and that it's just like streamlined process to apply there. It's nothing like the Dutch central bank. So yeah, we just announced it on Twitter, and immediately like hundreds of people signed up again. And we're getting like it's not like the 1 million per month yet, but we're getting decent volume again.
So in terms of like you mentioned some of the features, like you want to allow people to dollar cost average small amounts into Bitcoin with minimal to no KYC. Can you kind of just talk about the actual, like, I'm in Europe, I want to start stacking with Bittr. Like, what's the workflow look like, and what kind of information is entail?
Sure.
What are the buy limits?
Yes, so you go to the Bittr website, you put your email address, you confirm it, like, one of those confirm emails. Then you put your bank account number that you're going to be sending the Bitcoin, your euros from, sorry. Then you put in a Bitcoin address. And here's the tricky part, because in Switzerland, there are already those regulations that you have to sign a message with your Bitcoin wallet in order to prove that you own that Bitcoin address. But after that, it's done. So once you created that order, basically, you get banking details from us with a unique code that is just for you. And then every time you send money to our bank account with this Bittr code in the description field of the payment, we'll take that money, convert it into Bitcoin, and pay it out to the address that you provided.
Awesome. And then you don't actually even have to like upload a passport, anything like that. You just connect your bank account. You're assuming the bank account's already KYC'd, and then you have like the user must verify that they own the wallet.
Yes, exactly. And then the transaction limit, it's 900 euros per 48 hours. So you can do one transaction of 900 euros, wait 1 day, and then do another 900 euro transaction if you want to stack heavily.
Gotcha. So every 2 days you can purchase 900 euros without going through any increased KYC. Is Bittr just used for dollar cost averaging? Is it like, for example, if I wanted just to smash buy, do I send a wire to you? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it works. So like our bank, it has instant SEPA, which means that during, in theory, transactions should happen 24/7. But in our case, we can only read our bank account during business hours. So during business hours, if you send an instant SEPA payment, then we're going to process the money within 30 minutes. So if you want to like smash buy up until 900 euros, you can do that.
And then is there dollar cost averaging built in, or is it a manual process where you send SEPA payments every time you want to buy?
No, you can actually make your bank do that. So like every European bank has a feature to place a standing order. So then you can tell your bank like, oh, actually I do this transfer like every few days or every week or whatever you want to think of.
Gotcha. So your bank does the DCA. Bittr is almost like this like dumb conversion layer where it just hits your bank account, you buy Bitcoin, send it back.
That's it. It's that simple.
That's awesome. Are there any ambitions to making like a customer facing product or anything like that beyond just kind of the infrastructure?
Or you mean like an app or something like that?
Yeah, sure. App with an interface and all that kind of stuff.
For now, no. Like I just like to keep it simple. Like also by like some people have asked like, oh, I want to change my Bitcoin address or something like this. And then I'm thinking like, well, on other platforms, you put in your email address and you log in or something. To do that on Bittr, you just create a new order. Like it's just 3 steps. Like you would have to verify the Bitcoin address anyways, again, if you wanted to change it. So I don't really see the advantage of having a customer portal. And then from a security perspective, I'm just like, well, the less that is exposed on the internet, the better. Like there is just like the backend system of like placing the orders and doing the payouts. That's all like.
All right. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about like let's stop talking about your experience getting Bittr back on, what's happening now, to like what's your take on what's happening in Europe with Bitcoin adoption? Like I'm very curious, like you've kind of gone through these troubles. Obviously European regulators are actively trying to launch CBDC. They're actively applying more regulation here. Like Bitcoin Europe, like what's the status right now?
It's hard to tell. I just think that like I'm here in Lisbon and based in a co-working space that like most people here do something with crypto. And we started our meetups again 2 weeks ago. And they're just like a lot more busy than the last year or last 2 years even. So I have a feeling that like the interest is picking up again. And some topics that I do here now, which never came up before, is like the money printing. Like all of a sudden now with COVID, it's like, well, it's so weird. Like, we don't have to work and we're just getting free money. Like this is strange. And like, I have a feeling that this COVID, like the free COVID money, it's kind of accelerating people realizing that, their money is not so, cannot be taken for granted. And maybe it doesn't lose value yet, but I do think that it will make people realize it sooner because of COVID money. So I would think that brings more people to Bitcoin if they start then to realize like, oh, wait, there's this money that is actually scarce and nobody can just print more of it.
Yeah, I'm curious, like money printing in the US as a narrative has definitely picked up as well. And also price increases have really started to become very obvious. Gas in particular, something I've noticed is like it's an entire dollar more expensive than all the places that were already more expensive than the rest of the country in San Francisco a few weeks ago. So it's pretty obvious to kind of see that. Also, like the CPI numbers and stuff like that are like the official inflation numbers are definitely a lot higher than a lot of economists had been predicting, even though Bitcoiners were kind of saying like money printing is going to destroy all this stuff. Do you like, from a regulator perspective, like it looks like Switzerland is kind of like a hub. I know that Portugal and Lisbon have favorable tax situation for Bitcoiners and capital gains and that kind of stuff. Like, what does the continent look like? What does Europe look like in terms of like acceptance, openness, ease to do business, that kind of thing?
Ease to do business has become a lot harder since AMLD5. Like if you wanted to try something like with the fiat Bitcoin exchange kind of industry, like you could start small back in before 2020, but now just having like the cost of getting regulated and also the ongoing fees, it makes it impossible to try out something. Like you have to get a lot of capital in order to be able to even get started. So like bootstrapping a Bitcoin business, it seems very hard. And to me, that's annoying because like usually it's the startups that, they bring an industry forward and they innovate. But it seems like the EU. No, go ahead.
Do you think that this is AMLD5 making life very difficult for startups in the crypto space? Is this kind of like a symptom of a bigger problem that has persisted in Europe around being an entrepreneur in general?
Yeah, most definitely. Like all the, but I guess it's a bit the same in the US where like you might have some like local regulations, then you have some at the state level, and oh yeah, there's also the federal level. And so we're now getting more and more of that. Like, yeah, you used to have your national regulations that you need to abide by, and now it's just the EU that's slowly getting more and more into our daily lives by coming up with all sorts of regulations how we are supposed to do business, and they're really trying to make it EU wide everything, which is it's a kind of like modern thing, and I think it started like 10 years ago, and they're just on their way to, I mean, practically being involved with everything that you do on a daily basis.
I mean, isn't that the ultimate end game of fiat? Is that politics and government and top-down decision making infiltrates every aspect of your life?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, are Europeans going to push back? Like, are they just going to roll over and take it? Like, what are you optimistic? I'm just kind of curious based on what you're seeing as an entrepreneur. Is there light at the end of the tunnel in Europe, or is ultimately the next step finding a different jurisdiction?
I don't know. I was at a barbecue with some Bitcoiners last weekend, and one of the guys was saying there, like, it's kind of scary. Like, if you walk around in Portugal, or at least in Lisbon, um, everyone's wearing a mask, and like, obviously, that's, I mean, they have every right to wear one. Like, that's fine, but it's kind of strange to be wearing one outside all the time. And what's kind of then more scary is that even like the little kids, they're wearing a mask. And he was saying, he was a bit older than I am, and he was saying like, yeah, when we were kids, like whenever somebody told us what we're not supposed to do or what we're supposed to do, we would do the opposite. And so it's kind of scary that like even now our little kids are complying with what the government says, and I don't think that necessarily portrays a nice image for the future. Yeah.
Yeah, so over compliance. I'm in the Bay Area. The Golden Gate Bridge and the big bridge in Lisbon were made by the same architect and look very similar. And yes, also people are very, very much mask forward. It wasn't until last week that the CDC said it's safe to not wear a mask outside, and you still see about 50 to 60% of people wearing a mask outside. I'm not a health expert or anything like that, but it is very obvious to see the strong compliance culture, especially in the Bay Area and in California in general.
Yeah, and it seems just like that. I mean, I don't read any like mainstream news, but it doesn't seem like people are really revolting against whatever new rules people like governments come up with. Because with COVID, it's kind of like, for to me, it has become very obvious. Like, oh, they'll try to, like they'll make a rule for everything that you do in your life, and I don't see a lot of like revolt against that, which is scary to me.
No, yeah, and it's almost like it's a stigma to, if you speak out, then you're this evil person who doesn't care about the greater good and all this kind of stuff. So it's
Oh
like
yeah,
this
yeah.
villainization that is troubling, because like you don't want to be in a position where no one can speak out. That's like what Nazi Germany was like, right? That's what fascist Italy was like, and it wasn't a happy place.
Yeah, no, it's really scary, and with the EU putting their tangles into more and more of our daily lives, I think I don't really see how we're gonna like push back other than eventually defund them, and like if everyone just has Bitcoin, then they're no longer relevant because, well, they cannot take our money. If they cannot take their money, they cannot run.
Yeah, and yeah, if they can't print money to fund themselves, then they can't run either. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the European digital, or the digital euro that Christine Lagarde likes to talk about a lot. Personally, I'm bearish on them ever shipping. I'm bearish on any major central bank currency ever shipping, but I'm curious what you're seeing in Europe.
I don't follow it too much, honestly, but I honestly, I don't even see the difference that much between like the euro that we have today. Like, okay, probably it will, like, it's not really something that Bitcoiners should worry about, but probably more like commercial banks should worry about it, because it's the central bank digital currencies. It kind of replaces them. If you can have like a bank account or however wallet, whatever you want to call it, with the central bank directly, then what's the use of a commercial bank? So it doesn't affect me too much too.
Yeah. Do you see like what's commercial bank adoption of Bitcoin like in Europe? Because I mean, at least in the US, just earlier today, Wells Fargo announced that they're gonna offer, actively traded crypto products to their users. I put out a meme where CBDCs. It was like Bart from The Simpsons smashing Homer over the head with a chair, and that it said CBDC commercial banks, and then on the other side, it had Homer with a bandage on his head, commercial bank smashing Bart over the head with adopting Bitcoin. So I do agree that CBDCs are a direct competitor to commercial banks, and that commercial banks have the option to adopt Bitcoin and crypto.
Yeah, that would be nice. So far I've only seen like this one bank in Germany that seems to be kind of like moving forward, like doing crypto stuff. But it also seems to be run by like somebody who's really into shitcoins. But I think the idea is cool. I think what he did was like he was into crypto, and then he was just looking for any bank that was like probably going on the verge of bankruptcy, and he bought the bank. But in terms of mainstream banks publicly coming out here in Europe with like, oh, we have crypto services or whatnot, it's not really there, except for Switzerland, which now has two commercial banks. They're both new, so it's not like the old like known brands like Credit Suisse or UBS. It's Seba and Signum. But then again, like they're like this, like all their website is like full of crypto stuff. And then we approached them like, hey, we're a Bitcoin company. Do you want to like bank us? And they're like, no, too risky. So it's, I don't know, like their target seems to be like more like high net worth individuals that they want to bank and then offer services like Bittr does, but then at large scale to those rich people.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that's another symptom of fiat, right? Where it's the person that is credit worthy, the person that is worthy of giving financial services to, gets narrower and narrower and narrower to high net worth individuals who are very credit worthy and who can pay enormous amounts for actively managed crypto BS, right?
Yeah.
There's no incentive to take risk on a decent cash flowing business, or a decent, even an individual who has nothing to do with Bitcoin, who just wants to take out a loan. Like there's no upside for the bank there. Like effectively lowering interest rates to nothing, it kind of destroys the market that is there for money.
Yeah.
I guess want to just kind of wrap it up with, does Bitcoin make you optimistic? Again, like, do you see yourself leaving Europe in the long term to keep Bitcoining? Like, where's your kind of head at in the long term here?
It's my only hope, really. Like, I kind of already gave up on the whole like mainstream system and like the whole fiat system. I'm just like, well, this cannot be fixed anymore. So we better spend our time on building a new system. And it's probably going to be in parallel for a while. But yeah, to me, I'm just like trying to contribute to making Bitcoin more successful, and that's all I really care about. And it also it's actually the only thing that gives me energy. And like I don't know, I could not see myself in like working in some corporate environment, like kind of wasting my time. And I'm just like we need to make Bitcoin work. That's our duty.
All right, last question is like, what about Bitcoin gives you so much hope, right? And I feel like maybe that seems like an obvious question, but I'm kind of curious, you personally, like when you say Bitcoin is hope, like what personally, what's the light at the end of the tunnel for you there with Bitcoin?
People just like making more conscious and more well-informed decisions about money. Like just it's this simple mean of like fix the money, fix the world. It's so obvious to me, but apparently not to everyone around us. So yeah, I really think that if you have to think carefully, look, do I really want to spend this money on something new or something tangible or whatever? It's just going to make people live better lives.
Awesome. Well, I agree. Fix the money, fix the world. I'm not surprised that people in a fiat mindset, aka everyone, doesn't see Bitcoin, because it's a completely opposing operating system for, looking around you than the system that most people operate under, which is the euro and the dollar. So I get why it's not intuitive to the average person, but I do hope that over time more and more of the population is going to bridge over to a Bitcoin mentality, and that changes everything. Ruben, it was great, absolutely pleasure getting you on the podcast. I guess want to give you an opportunity to give a last word to our audience and tell people where they can learn more about you and Bittr.
All right, so I'm on Twitter. My handle is Watermaniac, and if you live in Europe, and you want a DCA, then just go to getbittr.com, sign up, and start stacking tomorrow.
All right, you love to hear it. All right, Ruben, thanks again for coming on the show and giving us your time, and congratulations on getting the business back on its feet.
Thanks for having me.
All right, cheers. Bye.